Insurance Insights is a presentation of the Institute's Griffith Insurance Education Foundation, whose mission is to empower public policymakers through a greater understanding of insurance and risk management. Deeply committed to objectivity, all Griffith Foundation programming is strictly instructional in nature and does not support a position on any issues.
I'm Frank Tomasello of the Institute's Griffith Foundation, and joining me in conversation from the Arkansas State Capitol building in Little Rock for this edition of Insurance Insights is the newly elected president of the National Council of Insurance Legislators, State Representative Deborah Ferguson of Arkansas. First elected in 2012, she's the recipient of numerous awards for her legislative work. The Municipal League, the Bankers Association, the Chamber of Commerce, the Arkansas Medical Society, and the Arkansas Dental Association have all named her an outstanding legislator. In addition, she's been honored by the Community Health Centers of Arkansas with the Legislative Advocacy Award. Prior to entering public service, Representative Ferguson practiced dentistry for some 25 years in West Memphis, Arkansas. Dr. Ferguson's medical training has equipped her to lead on a wide variety of health care and health insurance issues in the State General Assembly. In the moments ahead, we'll learn more about her background of service here in Arkansas, her involvement with NCOIL, and her thoughts as to the risk management and the insurance issues of import to public policymakers in the year ahead. While the role of president of NCOIL is new to you, you're not new to NCOIL. Would you tell us a bit about your involvement with NCOIL over the years? And for those unfamiliar with NCOIL, can you speak briefly about the organization and its role?
My first involvement with NCOIL was in 2014, and I was actually invited by our chair of insurance at the time to attend. And I was also new to the insurance committee. I was not on Insurance and Commerce my first term because you have to have a little seniority to be on Insurance and Commerce, but I was on Insurance and Commerce in 2014, my second term. And it was just very insightful. It was, I liked that it was very focused on insurance issues. I'm from a healthcare background. I was a dentist for 25 years before I retired and ran for office. My husband's a physician, my daughter's a physician, my whole family's in healthcare. My sister-in-law's a NICU nurse, my nieces are both nurses. So I really came from a very healthcare, health insurance background. But I've just really learned so much about other insurance products and being on the state insurance committee over the years. And really the Griffith Institute was really instrumental in that. The very first time in San Francisco, the Griffith Institute had a day before kind of an Insurance 101 workshop that they really talked about all different kinds of insurance products. And that was a great introduction for me to start coming to NCOIL meetings. Then just over the years, I became more and more involved with NCOIL and served in different capacities as chairs of different committees. But what I really like about NCOIL, as opposed to other national organizations that I'm involved with, is that it's very focused on insurance and financial issues. And it tends to be members who are on their insurance or financial or commerce committees in their state. A lot of them are chairs of those committees. And they just bring a wealth of information. So I've really learned so much from networking with other NCOIL legislators who come. NCOIL writes a lot of model legislation, which is really good. And what I really enjoy about NCOIL, they really try with the panels and the presentations to be very bipartisan and to present both sides, which is very helpful when you come back to run one of these model bills in the state because you've heard both sides of the issue and you really understand what the challenges are going to be and what the positive things are going to be when you run the bill. But just from an educational standpoint, I don't think you can beat what NCOIL does in terms of educating legislators.
Representative Ferguson, before we talk about what lies ahead for 2023, we would welcome your perspective on both the challenges and trends that public policymakers faced related to insurance in 2022. What are your takeaways from the year that's just concluded?
Well, certainly technology has played a huge part. I mean, if you look at people working remotely and telemedicine, I said I passed the first telemedicine bill in Arkansas, I guess 2015, but I don't think anything has accelerated the use of telemedicine and how insurance companies decide to pay for that like the pandemic. Because, you know, doing telemedicine and remote office visits with COVID has become so essential. So I think moving forward, how we take those public health emergency orders for telemedicine and move forward with payment modalities for those procedures is going to be important. Also, just the whole technology innovation in insurance in general. I mean, if we've looked at the regulatory sandbox models some states have done, and you want to make sure that things are safe, but you also want to embrace innovation, because certainly IT and technology innovation is going to be really important going forward for all different types of health insurance. I'm very proud that NCOIL during the pandemic we met in person, but we also had some Zoom options, and we've continued those Zoom options into 2022 for interim meetings. I think it's important to meet in person. I mean, there's no replacement for that. I mean, I'm glad we have the Zoom option, but I tell people it's much like telemedicine. I think telemedicine has its place, but it's really not a substitute for an in-person doctor's visit. And that's very much the same with meetings. I mean, a lot of what goes on at meetings goes on at dinner or in the hall or being able to network with representatives. So I'm glad we have Zoom, and I'm glad it got so much, I'm glad it happened so much during the pandemic, but moving forward, I think in-person meetings are really important.
What do you believe to be some of the most pressing priorities for state lawmakers in 2023 related to insurance, and what role do you see NCOIL playing in helping lawmakers to address those priorities?
Well, three things. One, when the public emergency ends and we have to do redetermination for eligibility for Medicaid patients, the government or CMS has required that we carry those people on the Medicaid rolls until the public emergency ends, and they've identified April 1st as the time that we have to reassess eligibility and drop people from the rolls that are no longer eligible. So that will be a really big challenge for states. The other thing is the whole transparency issues, whether that's in underwriting or it's transparency in hospital pricing. A lot of states are addressing those issues, and certainly the federal government has addressed hospital transparency. And of course the other thing is ESG, all of this controversy around how ESG will affect rating. For me, as a healthcare person, I'm very concerned about the reassessment of eligibility for Medicaid patients and how that will affect not just Medicaid rolls and the dollars for states, but how it will affect patients. If patients are in the middle of treatment and they lose their Medicaid, say they, if they're getting cancer treatments and then they all of a sudden lose their Medicaid, how is it going to affect the continuity of care? But for us too, because we've kept those people on the rolls, it has really meant about a $75 million positive per quarter to the state of Arkansas. So it will be a loss of income from losing those enrollees on the rolls. The second area of concern is transparency. And Matt Lehman, who's the past president of NCOIL, actually has a Transparency and Underwriting Model Act that we're considering at NCOIL right now. Clients deserve to know if they have an adverse action taken against them, if their premium went up or they're denied coverage, why that coverage was denied. And it used to be easy. There were only 2 or 3 parameters, but now with all of the computer technology and AI, clients really don't have a way of understanding why that adverse action was taken. I mean, instead of 2 or 3 parameters, they're looking at sometimes 50 or 100 different parameters that are fed through a computer algorithm system.
And is there another component with respect to transparency?
Yes, certainly we have concerns about hospital transparency. There was a federal rule to require Hospital Transparency and Pricing Act in 2019, but there's not been very good compliance. So a lot of states, and particularly Tom Oliverson, who's a physician and the NCOIL vice president, has a Hospital Pricing Transparency Act for NCOIL to look at. And a lot of states are starting to pass their own transparency acts because the federal compliance has been so poor.
Representative Ferguson, you noted a third priority for 2023, that being ESG. For those unfamiliar with the term, that refers to environmental, social, and governance factors. We'd appreciate your thoughts on that topic.
Well, certainly we learned from the last NCOIL meeting how divisive this issue can be. There are certainly states that feel very differently about addressing those issues and how they affect company governance. My concern is that you have states like Texas who are heavily dependent on fossil fuels for education funding and state funding because they don't have an income tax, and how it will affect those states if people start to implement those policies. But then you have states like California who probably would embrace a lot of the ESG policy. So I guess my biggest concern is if we start to have states who pass very different laws, and we already have laws introduced in Arkansas. I think most states have some kind of legislation around ESG already introduced. And if we start to limit ESG in some states and require it in others, what's that going to do to national companies trying to negotiate business between different states? It concerns me that it will require us to move away from state legislation to some kind of federal legislation.
Representative Ferguson, cybersecurity and cyber risk are no doubt shaping public policy discussion in 2023. Can you speak to the impact of cyber risk on public policymakers?
Certainly we've all seen that there are ransom payments and cyber attacks on individual businesses. I mean, even small doctors' offices, banks. A lot of people have had some cyber attacks and paid payments and had risk. But I think the bigger overriding issue is some big attack from Korea or Russia or something that really disables huge systems of security for the country. And maybe going forward becomes more of a federal issue like the TRIA Act.
Representative Ferguson, in the 8 years you've been involved with NCOIL, you've no doubt seen changes. We'd appreciate your perspective on how things have changed during that period of time.
I really want everyone to understand what a benefit NCOIL has been. I said there's been no better time than the last 10 years to have been a state legislator. Congress has become so dysfunctional that so much legislation gets done through model legislation that's passed from state to state. So what we do at NCOIL with insurance model bills is really important. And the presentations we make, it's important to me that we continue to have pleasant conversations that represent both sides of issues on panels. We've always done that, and I think it's really important that we remain bipartisan and that our panels are representative of both sides of issues. We're meeting in San Diego March 9th, and I hope any legislators who are watching will try to attend. We do have scholarships for first-time attendees, and states that are member states also have stipends to help pay their way. And we not only have insurance companies who attend, but in fact, most of the corporate people who attend, the majority are not insurance companies. The NCOIL website is great. It has all the model legislation, it has minutes from meetings, and it's not only a great place for legislators, but other interested parties. We have corporate people who come, we have consumer representatives who attend, and I'm really pleased that over the last 8 years that I've been involved with NCOIL, we've really established a great relationship with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which is really valuable because we work hand in hand with them in terms of legislation and insurance regulation.
Representative Ferguson, thank you for inviting me to join you here at the State Capitol in Little Rock, Arkansas. We appreciate you sharing your insights and expertise with us at the Institute's Griffith Foundation.